facing head-on the emotions beneath the surface as we bridge from an old world of confusion and lack to a beautiful new world of freedom, abundance, and love with straightforward truth and inspired hope is what you'll find on The Charla Anderson Show. Collector and connector of fascinating people. And everyone is fascinating. Here's your host, Charla Anderson.
Good, beautiful day, you beautiful, beautiful souls. This is Charla Anderson, host of the Charla Anderson Show, collector and connector of fascinating people, and everyone is fascinating, especially you. So grateful that you would take your time to listen to me, learn, and enjoy the camaraderie we're creating in this platform. And of course, I'm loving my Win-Win Women platform. We're live streaming and now coming out as podcast with Podetize. And I am so excited to have jumped in and joined this journey. Here I am entering my 7th decade of life, and I ain't stopping. I'm not quitting yet. I have an incredible guest today. We're going to meet Pamela Chanel in just a few moments. But first, we're going to do the breathing exercise. It's my centering, gathering, most favorite thing to do. And before we get started, because world is a little frantic right now, and I think a little grounding is a good thing. And you can certainly do it multiple times a day. A 22-second mini vacation. So here we're going to breathe in calm for 7 seconds. We're going to hold for 4 seconds, and we're going to breathe out gratitude for 11 seconds. Okay, ready to join me? Let's breathe in 7 seconds, calm. Hold. Release, breathe out gratitude. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. Helps me. Hope it helps you. Sure, it probably does. Our life is, we're frantic. There's so much going on. It feels frenetic out in our world. And so take a few moments now and then, turn off that media and get centered. Today, I'm so grateful to reconnect with one of the people I met in California, I believe, in the last big event, public event that we went to in 2020. I believe it was probably the end of February sometime of 2020. And we went to Jake Ballantyne's, what was it called? Anyway, we met there, and we'll talk about that. But so Pamela Chanel Monasch David. She's got a lot of names. And so I'm going to ask her on here to see what we want to call her today. But we met in California in 2020. I was so inspired by her story, and I don't remember the details of the story. So we'll hear some of that now, because I'm talking about overcomers, and I know that's part of her story in a big way. And she has a podcast and a book called The Reinvented Life, and that gives you a hint about what she's all about. So, Chanel, should I call you Chanel or Pamela?
Perfect.
Yes. Chanel. Okay, great. Well, you live in California, so it's a little bit earlier out there, and I'm grateful for you to take the time to join me, and let's get this show going with tell me who you are in this world, and we'll talk about what you do too.
First of all, I want to thank you. I want to thank you for what you're out there doing in the world. You bring such joy. You bring such hope. It is so wonderful to keep seeing you inspire more and more each day, watching what just happened with your book and just the light that you bring. It is such an honor to be a part of any or all of that. So I appreciate you very much. And like yourself, I want to bring hope to people. I want to bring light to people. And my story is one of reinvention, not only for myself, but what I've taken from that and now formed an entire platform around called, as you said, the Reinvented Life. It is close to 8 years ago now that I sat with my doctor, who had been my doctor probably 16, 17 years at that point. And she told me, quite frankly, based on all the labs, everything I had taken, the condition I was in, that I had maybe at best a year to live. And that's really where this part of my journey starts. And an illustrious corporate career, of an amazing family, 3 children. I call them children. They're all adults. They're all out there doing their wonderful things in the world. But in doing so, and I'm sure because this is entitled Win-Win Women, right? As women, particularly, we tend to do for everyone else before ourselves, putting everyone and everything else first. And that's where I was. So with my career and with my raising family relationship at the time, volunteer organizations that I was part of all the things that my children were involved in, I just got lost and literally abandoned myself. So I pick up that part of the story because when I say abandon myself, I first and foremost abandon any connection with myself between my mind, my spirit, my soul, my emotion, and my physical body. And in doing so, I reached that day that I just talked about, which was all about possibly having a year to live. It had gotten that dire. And I share that with people because, again, I want to bring them hope that all is possible. I was morbidly obese, 200 pounds overweight, and I'm 5'1" on a good day, right? High blood pressure, high cholesterol, sugars that were through the roof. Scared the doctor so much that she didn't even need to do an exam. She just had me come in her office and tell me if I didn't reclaim my life, I wasn't going to have one. And so the process of reclaiming that, the state of overwhelm that threw me in, where do I begin? Where do I start? And what started was this realization very, very quickly, early on in those days, 8 years ago, of the realization of all the limiting beliefs that I was carrying with me. So besides all the extra weight, I was carrying enormous limiting beliefs. And I really, to this day, don't really know where they came from. At an idyllic childhood, I have the greatest family, supportive family anyone could ever want. I'm surrounded still by childhood friends and people I've spent my whole life with. Just beautiful people. But along the way, it happened. And so instead of worrying about where they came from, I had to immediately deal with them. And one was, I wasn't athletic. I don't know where that came from, but I just had never made it part of my world. And so knowing in the reclaiming of my health that it had to involve many things, one of them was starting to move my body. And then I started discovering limiting beliefs about not carrying extra weight for the sake of it, but why was I carrying this extra weight? And when I realized that I wasn't nourishing myself and hydrating myself in the way that I should. Now, these all may sound like simple things, but they all added up to the most dangerous health condition one could find themselves in. And so I would say to anyone as a start, whether you want to do anything that serves you better in life, it was the shifting of those thoughts. So instead of I'm not this and I'm not that and I'm not athletic and I'm not eating the best foods and I'm not eating toxin free and all of those things, I just flipped a switch. And with it, the Reinvented Life was born. And that switch was And I've termed it and coined it now personal justice. In my book, you'll see it there as personal justice, which boils down to how do we treat ourselves in the most just way possible? How do we treat ourselves with the most grace? How do we treat ourselves with the most kindness? How do we do for ourselves first? Which, by the way, was another limiting belief. I had doing for yourself first as something that was selfish. However, I came to find out that if I flipped that as well and realized as I became the strongest physically and stronger mentally and stronger emotionally and even stronger spiritually, now you can show up for others, which is really my mission in life, which is to inspire others. It has to start with your strongest self. And it has to really incorporate all of those aspects I talked about. So people that are hearing this, you have to realize, you can use me as an example. I had an illustrious career. I was a senior vice president, worked my way up, major corporation. I had the most incredible career ever. However, in all of that, it was just my mind showing up, my work ethic showing up, my tenacity showing up. It was not the loving for myself showing up. And that's the basis for the Reinvented Life, for everything I've created, the stages I take people to. I do tremendous business coaching as an example. But when I coach someone on their business, inevitably, I also do life coaching.
They're interrelated. You can't do one without the other.
They're absolutely related and reflective. One's business is absolutely reflective of where one is. And so in the process of this reinvention, what I learned physically, how I lost at this point 178 of those 200 pounds, how I put myself first and learned to do that not at the expense of others.
Can I ask you how? So there's a little key right there in my mind that, or a question, I guess, about, did others encourage you, or were they like, who do you think you are? How did you sound like you're in such a supportive community. You may not have had some of that negative input that, you are being selfish instead of self-care. So selfish means care for self, right? And self-centered is another word that is what we interchange for that.
Well, I think that's a great question because, yes, I am in such a sort of supportive community that people in my most intimate circles were very supportive and very pleased to see me getting healthier. But I got to tell you, that was another limiting belief that I had to overcome, which is that everyone means well. What I will tell you, what I've discovered is people generally, I would say most of the time, do the best they can in what they're equipped with then. But to your point, it was staggering. It was staggering the comments I was getting. It was staggering the jealousy I was getting. It was staggering the questions, as you just said, who do you think you are? Because people were used to seeing me in a certain way. And now when I was prioritizing, again, the key was myself, but never at the expense of others, is the real learnings. And it's actually become an integral part, and I'm glad you brought that up, of the Reinvented Life, is helping people and teaching people how to do that.
And how to support it. I mean, in that, you have got to have them understand that their little snide comments or whatever is not ever going to be helpful. And I do believe that people, and this is probably where you were, you didn't love yourself enough to take care of self. And, those of us who are servers, me, how can I make a difference? How can I serve? You can't serve from an empty cup. My analogy, which I love, is, you pour your coffee, if anybody knows what saucers are anymore these days, but, you have a cup and a saucer, and you pour your cup full until it's overflowing into that saucer, and you serve from the saucer. And I think that's a really sweet illustration of how we maybe could manage that differently. And what you said almost, so my next book coming out is called Split Second Transformation, Change Your Words, Change Your Life, 31 Daily Practices. And you just said that you flipped a switch. You had a split second moment that you changed. People don't think you can do that, but you can. You can change your life in a split second. And you just acknowledged that. So tell me about that split second, because that's a huge part of my world.
Well, and I love that you said that. I love, does not surprise me. We're on the same wavelength because it starts with value. I had to really take a strong look and realize I took my value for granted. I was raised in such a supportive, amazing to this day environment, but I took for granted the fact that we have to value ourselves. Everyone else around me valued me so much, but I had abandoned that value. So the split second came from, and it's the foundation, honestly, of the Reinvented Life, which was a decision to think of something differently and different than how I was looking at it. And that is how you change it so quickly. You make a decision to have a new thought.
That decision, when the decide means cutting out side, any side word, genocide, all those side words is cutting out all other options. You made a decision to save your life, and it's saving your life was literal. And so you truly made a decision, and there's so much support out there. There's so much knowledge and information and tools to do that, to help you through that. What did you use? Where did you find your inspiration, or who did you follow at that time that might have guided you, or did you get a coach, or where were you at that time in that split second transition?
Yeah. So looking back at it, of course, I was fortunate. I was with a functional medicine doctor who really helped start to show me a balance between Western and Eastern medicine and alternative approaches to things. So I had that. But honestly, that split second decision came from within. It actually came from my soul. It came from within, and knowing that not only was it life-changing at the time for myself physically, but the 5 stages that I developed for myself, I've really packaged, and people can use in any single thing of their life. So it started with the new thought. And that new thought was, not to make light of it, but this isn't working. I'm about to. Right?
It's like, duh.
Exactly, duh.
And you're going to how did I get to this point? I mean, it is not when a decision you didn't grow, as a child go, I want to be obese when I grow up.
No, exactly.
I don't think nobody makes that decision.
I just abandoned myself. Or another way to think of it is I just disconnected my body from everything else in my life. So my first thought, and back then where it started, and yes, to answer your question, subsequently, I've received some amazing coaching, but I've actually been able to translate that and provide amazing coaching too. So it's like a payback. But at the time, when you make a decision, whatever that may be. So I shifted it from what I had to lose, because when you're thinking about loss and what you want to get rid of and what's a nuisance and all of that, you're stuck in it. You're just basically stuck in it. And so when I made that decision to, as I mentioned, personal justice, how do I treat myself in a new and in a brighter and a kinder way? The stage one I've developed is that thought has correlative actions to it. So I had to relearn everything. I had to relearn that I could move. I had to relearn that I need to hydrate continuously through the day. I had to relearn what I ate and the toxins that are in their food and all of it. I mean, there's toxin all over. We can't avoid it. It's around us. It's in the environment. But making a conscientious effort to do the things that rid that as best as possible. What was gut health? How did that? Right? I mean, all of these things, I didn't know that our gut is the epicenter of our entire body. Why? Because it is what sends the signal to the brain, and then our brain reacts accordingly. So it was all of these correlative actions to the thought of, I got to treat myself in a new and a brighter and a kinder way. And that's the first stage for anyone. In anything they want to do, they don't have to deconstruct from where they are. They have a new thought that have the correlative actions. Now, upon doing those, the second stage I've developed, and this is exactly what I did, I based it all on what I did, was I created new habits. So I created new habits surrounding the new thought with those correlative actions. And the outcome of that is the third stage, which are routines. Routines are what? Collection of habits.
And changing habits. So Tom Ziegler is, one of my mentors, and he said he has a quote that the fastest way to success is to replace old habits with new habits. And it seems trivial. I mean, almost, it's minor to say it that way, but it's the truth.
It's the absolute truth. And I learned to stack them as well. So by stacking habits, I mean adding on good things to things that were already a routine. So, getting up and brushing my teeth, as an example, it's a routine. I do it all of the time. It's a habit. But I added lemon water to that. So I stacked them together. So I start the day with lemon water. I'm starting with hydration. And so to one's daily hygiene, you can stack some things on that make it easier to remember.
You mentioned toothbrushing. You get up and this is my 69th year, and I've this year have finally created enough morning routine that I meditate every morning and things like that. And with my 19-month-old granddaughter, we get in and I do what I call Sonicare shuffles. So I have a 2.5 minute toothbrush and I'm walking in place or balancing or lifting heels or something can you imagine starting at 19 months old, learning that habit of movement? That's 2.5, maybe 5 minutes a day that you, are doing some movement that you would not be doing otherwise. And so that's to me, when I figured that out several years ago, but, movement in place for 2 or 2.5 minutes every time you brush your teeth, it's not much, but it's something.
No, it absolutely is much, because it's an example of what we're talking about. You're stacking a habit, whether it's even heel lifts, calf raises, any things you can do while doing other things, you've added movement to your day.
And even trying to stand on one leg is a really good one for those of us that are, as we age, balance is a big deal. So what if we worked on that a little bit, even even that. So it's a place to start. That I love this layering because you're not changing everything. You're changing and adding one little thing that might make it simpler. So yeah.
Exactly. And those habits, as I mentioned, they form routines. You start to form collections of mini routines, and they do what? They take you into the fourth stage, which is lifestyle. So now your lifestyle is reflective all the way back to that first thought. In this case, in the case of the example I'm giving you, is how do I treat myself better physically? You create a lifestyle, which is a collection of those routines. And inevitably, it takes you into the fifth stage. And that fifth stage is, it becomes an embeddedness. It becomes part of who you are. And here is where most people get stuck. So often we hear this saying, I am who I am, or that's who I am. And I say that very tongue in cheek because it's one of the most destructive things that people can say because, and in my book, I make light of it, but I call it rubber cement, right? Something everyone can relate to. You can get cemented in to how you are. And to make any shifts from that, you feel like, and this is, what goes on in people's minds, that you're almost going against yourself. And who wants to go against themselves, right? Like that salmon swimming upstream against themselves. So what I encourage people to do is be more fluid. And I describe it in my book, be more like the water, moving in the river, moving in a stream, than the boulders or the rocks. Because if you're the water, you can become more fluid. And it's a natural, beautiful analogy that people can think about when there's more fluidity in one's life and to one's life. It enables them to what?
Flow. Flow. Go with the flow. Yes. And
the flow rather than stick.
And I love that analogy of because, a running water will wear down those boulders and you're become an overcomer that way in a big way. So you mentioned the words I am, and let me just add to that, because in my book, every time you say I am, it's who you are. You say I am tired. That's who you are in that moment. You continue saying that, and that's who you become. What if you started shifting that word to I'm refreshed or I'm pumped, and you shift your and people go, well, I'm lying to myself because I am tired. And I'm like, no, well, maybe, but you're training yourself, right? Because the breath of life, the I am in you, is the I am of life coming through you, and it's the most powerful word you have. Who I am is who I say I am.
Yes.
And so that that's such a big message that I think we've not been taught.
Yeah, we've not been taught it, because if you are going to be anything, you want to emphasize the things that help you continue to grow. And what I describe is growth for people. And right on the front of my book, I put, embracing change. And I can't tell you how much I thought about, do I want to put that word change right on the front of the book? Because it's the most fearful thing for people. Change is fearful. And I always say that somewhere along the line, we forget that growth is the most natural place we can be. So, I use the analogy, an infant becomes a toddler, who becomes a young child, who eventually becomes a preteen and grows into a teen, and then ultimately into an adult. And it's in that adulthood that we start recognizing that growth, those stages are natural. And so when we get to that fifth stage about anything in life, and now what I've described physically, it could apply to one's emotional state, could apply to one's career, could apply to one's relationship, could apply to anything in one's life. When they make that second decision, that 1 second decision, like you're saying, in that they want something to go forward, to move forward in a way that maybe they didn't even envision for themselves at first. And that decision has then correlative actions. And it's easy to measure because people like to measure, right? People like evidence to their mind. And so it becomes much easier to measure if it is going in the direction you want it to go in by looking at those actions and saying, are they correlative? Are they correlative to whatever is this newness that one is looking at in their life? And if it's not, they can massage it. But it's the confronting it. And it's the willingness. It's all about the willingness to take something on. And then once people do, I have time after time of experience that, and I just saw your hands do it.
It's a renewal. It's a refreshment. Yeah.
Yes.
And what you're saying about change is inevitable. I mean, that quote, change is inevitable and misery is optional. I've heard that, but there's not 1 second in our second, right this second, that something isn't changing. I mean, our cells are growing, our cells are changing, and we can't change anything that happened to the last second, but only the next second. So change is constant. Mm-hmm. And people who resist it so strongly, they're stuck in an old mindset. And, that set mindset of, complaining and I don't want to change or whatever it is, that becomes a huge bad habit, and it can, and it takes over your life as well. So it reverts back to habit. It reverts back to, towards change.
It surely does. And that's really the basis, of the Reinvented Life is coaching people, as I mentioned, whether it be their business or their life or a combination. What is it that has people not wanting to move or wanting to move but not knowing what to do? That's really the basis of what I do, is show
fear. It's fear of, and that fear keeps you stopped because you don't know what to do. And in this day and age, the resources are there's too many, so we can't get enough information. We have access to information. And then there's so much, we don't know which one to choose. And so it really perpetuates that staying stuck sometimes because there's too much. Yes. And so we're like, I don't know what to choose. So I'll just flip channels a little bit more.
Yeah. Yeah. And, really when it gets down to it, and I've added a lot in, especially of late, to options that are out there. There's a lot of options out there. I've recently had my astrology chart read by an intuitive astrologer who was able to bring so many new tools and so many new awarenesses to things that are there. I had a guest on the Reinvented Life show last week. It was a profound hypnotist that is helping people go in and tap into and get to the depth of their soul and what those soul mean. The closer you can find out who you are, who your real being is, will now make it so that you can take more pride. And to bring back to one of the initial things you said, which is so true, is see the value of your work. we only experience what we're able to consciously experience until we delve into other realms. And that conscious access is about 5%. So we're operating on about 5% of who we really are. And that light and that magnificent being that people are gets so clouded by decisions they've made. Some have worked, some haven't worked, some have worked great. But over time, it's like a chipping away at one's value. And so it's the reclaiming. For me, it was like reclaiming physical health, but it has spread over so many new areas that I get excited. Like, it's hard to contain myself when I know the potential that is out there for people.
Amazing. I love this. You are so clear. This is the deal. This is what you're so incredibly step-by-step clear. And on the process, you've lived it, you've learned it, you've loved it, you've done all these things. And you have created a community, I guess, on Facebook. You've got the Reinvented Life. So people are going to find you by Facebook, the Reinvented Life.
Facebook, the Reinvented Life. They're always welcome. And what I love is when people reach out to me via email, info@thereinventedlife.com, info@thereinventedlife.com. We have presence, I have presence on Instagram and on LinkedIn, and make it so very easily accessible to people.
And then your podcast is where and when?
It's every Wednesday. It's a live stream podcast. It's broadcast on AMP2 Media. It's on Facebook. It's on all of the Facebook platforms. And so there's some riveting shows there that bring forward people that have reinvented their life and also are in the process of coaching and mentoring some of them and teaching others how to do it. Because if people know it's possible, it's a lot easier for them to engage in the journey.
And the journey there's no end to the journey. The end, don't you just feel giddy sometimes, excited about how much there is of life right now? And people, I know the world is crazy out there right now, but I'm outrageously optimistic. And I've said that for a lot of years before all this stuff started, but I believe that because we choose to focus on what's possible and hope and love. And when I made a conscious decision a few years ago to go, who I am is love. And when I step out, it's interesting that people sometimes don't want to leave your presence. They're kind of like drawn to you because you have the light, the love, and you don't have judgment and the negative energy, low energy vibrations. You have high vibrations, and people are so attracted to that. You get somebody coming in to fix your plumbing or something, and then you go and they just kind of hang around a little longer than they need to just be in the presence of somebody that loves them just exactly who and where they are. They don't have to do or anything, be anything. Am I saying, and the harder people are to love, the more they need it, is the truth. They don't love themselves enough, so they make themselves hard to love. We have that opportunity to send them love anyway. Not a saying in my little book, it's unconditional love, not unconditional love, unconditional forgiveness, but not unconditional boundaries. I'm not ever saying, don't keep awareness of your boundaries, right? But doesn't mean you still can't love people and forgive them. It raises your vibration, which raises the vibration, which raises our vibration. So,
yeah. And I think what you said is so important, this notion of judgment. When you remove that, it doesn't mean that you have to like everything and everyone, but it empowers you to make a choice as to how you want to receive that. So to answer one of your original questions, how did people take it when I was, initially on this path? There was a lot of, who do you think you are? A lot of that. But I just made a choice to know that that is reflective of where they
are. Yes.
And so it has really helped. And the clients and the people I work with, it has really helped them when I bring up this notion about living outside of judgment, because we truly don't know what anyone has been through in life. And there well may be reasons why they feel that way. And much of the work I do is with clients that say, all right, I finally realize there may be something better out there for me, or there may be a new way for me to look at something. And then that's when their freedom starts to happen. And the first thing we work on is removing the judgment, because judgments is based on an ideal that very well may be not even real, all made up.
Usually.
How many times have we had these emotions about things? But when we realize, is there really any merit to it? Is there any credibility to it? Or was there at the time, but it's not relevant today? And so that's where you can bring clarity to people. It's really a beautiful cycle.
And another chapter in my little split-second transformation book is about, it's called Isn't That Interesting? So if you think one thing and I think something else, I'm like, well, that's interesting. Tell me more. And it creates some discourse, maybe some conversation. It allows more evidence to come forth instead of I'm right, you're wrong.
And so I think the notion that change is scary, it's because oftentimes people stick with the known versus what they consider the unknown. They're used to the routines at a place of work or at a job or at a home or within a family or within school, whatever it may be. Instead of asking themselves the question, it may have been this, but what more is there in life? We hear about people all the time that stay with things because they don't necessarily even know what's open out there for them.
They stay very small. They're very small-minded. This week I was thinking about that. Small-minded people talk about gossip and other people and weather and instead of ideas, and the bright people are looking at ideas and what's possible. And I saw, speaking of therapy and hypnotherapy and all that stuff, I saw a statistic that in traditional psychotherapy, it takes 600 sessions to have like a 32% increase in something. 600. Mm-hmm. So traditional therapy, it's always facing backwards, talking about the past and what was wrong instead of, so normal, more intuitive therapy, the coaching and that sort of thing, has a much higher success rate. And then hypnotherapy was like 93% with maybe 6 sessions or something like that. So hypnotherapy and coaching therapy are that kind of, rather than traditional lay on the couch and and talk about your past, you never get, you're stuck in the past the whole time. And how can you get out of that if you stay there? Anyway, I just thought that statistic was huge from 600 sessions to 6 sessions with the opposite amount of results.
It's absolutely true. And to go back to what you were saying when you say small-mindedness, and it ties into what you were saying about the therapeutic work at all. You know, I don't even know that it's as much small-minded as it's an inability or an unwillingness, or just hasn't come to the circumstance yet to make that elevation, to open that door, to open that window, to see what else is there. And part of what you're saying, it is so true. It's because traditional therapeutic work deals again with 5%, that which we are conscious of. And so when you can get into other realms, it opens us up to such a vast amount of possibilities that we don't know we're there.
And we got so many blind spots, and we don't know what we don't know. And when, it's that is much more infinite than what we do know. And so this has been amazing. I love your clarity. You're on point, and they can find you at the Reinvented Life. And what's next for you? What's last message and what's next for you? Because this hour goes so fast.
Yes. Well, again, to reach me directly, go to email info@thereinventedlife.com. That'll get right to me, and I'll get right back to anyone. Love to have these conversations.
And you say I saw you on Charla's show.
Yes.
I heard you on Charla's show.
Charla. What's next for me is very exciting. I work with producers out of Boca Raton, Florida, and in Delray on my show. And they are expanding to multiple cities around the country, opening up production studios. And we're opening one up in the San Francisco Bay Area. So completely excited about that, and to be involved with them and producing shows with them. They're just extraordinary people. And that's a big next step to ultimately creating a Reinvented Life Center where people can deal with all the things, their physical, their spiritual, their emotional, their mental transformation. And we could do a whole show on mental health and what an epidemic that is, and how much we all could be positive contributions to that. So we just want to be a place that is a refuge for positive living.
Awesome. You said San Francisco area. So you've been a 4th generation over there in San Francisco area, which is always a beautiful
I'm
place.
Actually 5th. I'm really proud of that. My kids are 6th, if you can believe. So
wow. So that says a lot for
very proud of myself. Yeah.
That says a lot for your history and your continuity, right, of presence. So that's very, very exciting. I'd maybe have another conversation after this. I have thoughts. I want to know more about this the studio idea you've got, because I've got a studio idea myself. So maybe it's a different type, but we'll see. Have a conversation at some point. But I am grateful for your time. I'm grateful that you have shared so clearly your message, and you've given like an outline. If people can't afford to do anything, they can listen to the outline and start going, listening. Okay, maybe I could change one habit or add one step to make my life better or simpler and less chaotic. I gave up the attachment to drama a few years ago. I didn't really have it much anyway compared to some, but I'm like, I don't have to live in drama. I don't have to subscribe to it. Things happen. Do I have to engage in that? No. And so there's little hints that we can, and it's like a muscle. It takes practice. You can't, some things are split second, but it's usually a decision that's split second. And then it's easy to lose sight when you're real world. When I had a split second from bitterness to joy, that it was permanent in that moment.
Yes.
It wasn't constant. There were moments, but for the most part, I don't know how many years later, who I am is joy. And I had a split second transformation from bitterness to joy. And that became who I am. And I've said it multiple times. The stories are all over the place. And I've got it in the book, and it's all choice. It's all choice. Everything is choice. A choice to decide, a choice to take a next step, a different step. I can't change last step. I can only change the next step. And if I don't like where I am, maybe I could take a step to the right instead of the left, or to the middle and, leap. I don't know. But it's all choice. But we can't change one thing that direction. Not one.
Yeah.
It's already happened. So
absolutely.
Thank you, Chanel, for being my guest today. Thank you for your contribution to humanity, which is, I just see that rising, and what an overcomer story when all of a sudden, how did I get this way? And what am I going to do about it? And you didn't really say a lot of how. It's like, I am this way. So who I am right now is this way. So I deal with what's so. And right. It's what's so. You're in what's so is where you are right this second. And it's all you got. What's so. And when you change what's so to make a decision, you've laid it out in a beautiful outline. Anybody needing some support in that, I highly recommend finding info at the Reinvented Life, finding Chanel there. And we're loving you so much. And I'm grateful. I'm grateful for Jake Ballantyne having that event back there in 2020 that just brought several of us. I had Shantae on. I've had, several of us are connected here now. Again, reconnected 3 years later. So it's really fun. It's fun. And you're not having fun, you better change something.
Yeah, for sure.
So I'm going to just thank you very much. I'm going to just say, as I always do towards the end of the show, I love everyone. I want you to understand that you are blessed. You're perfect exactly who and where you are right this minute. There's nothing you can do to be loved more or less by God and by many of us. Be blessed. And remember to always, always, always choose joy.
Parting is such sweet sorrow. The Charla Anderson Show. Encouraging you to stand strong and courageous with bold faith, no fear, immense hope, kindness, and love, especially towards yourself. Visit charlaanderson.com for replays, blogs, and more on her ever-expanding website, as well as watch her live TV show on winwinwomen.tv, Roku, Apple TV, and Amazon Fire. And so that we can continue learning together and growing this community of beautiful souls, we invite you to share the Charla Anderson Show with your circle of friends. Until we meet again next week, remember always, choose joy.